Hi, welcome to In Air's Kitchen. This is a bread episode, and this is going to be day 5 of our bread making process. We met up on Monday to make a starter, and then we checked in on a Tuesday, and we checked in on Thursday. Wednesday we took off, right? And then Thursday we refreshed that starter. So now we're on Friday and we're ready to make bread. Once you get to this point and you've got that starter working, you can make bread today, tomorrow, the next day. You can make bread next Tuesday, next Friday. You're going to have to refresh that starter the night before you make bread if you're going to follow this schedule. And it's about 12 hours, so if you want to refresh in the morning and try and bake at night, you can do that too. But we've been doing it where we refresh in the evening, let it sit overnight, which is what that refresh needs, and then we make the bread the next day. And that gives us a bread that's ready to go about 3 p.m. or so. So that's the schedule we've been working on. We've got a lot to cover in this episode today, and I really, this is, without any question, the most technically challenging of the recipes we've done so far. The reason I've been really excited to do bread and show people this method is that it's inexpensive, super nutritious, really delicious, and it's something that you can make once you gain some skill. You can make without too much trouble at home. And you don't need that many ingredients, really just flour and water and salt is all we're talking. So that's what's exciting about it. On the other hand, if you're just starting out at bread, you may want to go back and watch the episode on Tuesday where we showed you how to make a simple white yeasted loaf. That is a much more straightforward recipe. It was a lot easier to get that done. And this one's a lot more complicated, but it's really delicious, it's a lot of fun, and I'm going to try to make it as simple and easy to follow as possible. I'd love people to ask questions. I know some of you are following along at home. I've already gotten some photographs of people's breads and starters, and I would just love to hear from you. Ask us questions. If there are things that seem unclear, I'm sure there are other people that would benefit from a better explanation. With all that said, I'm just going to go through the steps again. How's it going? Good? All right, Violet's manning the question booth there, so if anybody sends a question, she'll relay them over here. So we started out Monday, we made a starter, and the starter needs like 3 to 5 days to develop. Ours was in pretty good shape after 3 days, but you might need longer depending if your house is a little colder. Maybe the flour you use has a little less life in it. So there's variables on how long that might take. And this was the recipe we used for the starter. I went and updated the videos to make sure the recipes are in the comments section of the videos. We just didn't do much over those days. We made this big starter and we just played with it like once a day, which just means we reached our hands in, very clean hands, and like mixing it around a little bit and letting it be. So this is actually my starter now. I'm running out of bowls, so I transferred it from a bowl to a jar, but you can see it bubbling away there. And this is the one we started with. This is the one we started with on Monday. So I'm going to show you some fun things to do with this leftover starter. None of this is going to be wasted. Richard's method is really different than a lot of other starters. If you've done sourdough starters before, you might have been scratching your head a little bit, wondering why we're doing it this way. I think if you go back and look at some of those interviews with Richard, it helps explain a little bit. The big idea here is that if we put a lot of food out there, then we will have a really beautiful starter develop without a lot of trouble on our part. And most of the other starter recipes, they start with a whole lot less flour up front, but then they have you throwing a bunch of starter out each day and then refreshing it with new flour, and then throwing it out, refreshing and throwing it out. By the end of that whole process, you will use up more flour than this method, even though it feels like this is a lot to make. And the other thing is we're not throwing anything out, so we get to save all of the starter. We used a little bit of it. We used 20 grams yesterday to refresh, and that's what's over in here. But we still have all the starter, and we can use this to make more bread. We can also use it to make other things, which is pretty awesome. So that's the starter. We refreshed it yesterday, and we made it into like a little dough ball, and we put it in a jar. And this is the one that I made with that starter. And so I labeled it 10% inoculation, 3 days old. The reason I labeled it is I was doing a whole bunch of them. And what we wanted is for it to double in height. So I put my label right at the top of the little mound of dough that we had made. And then this morning I took a peek at it and I wanted to see that it roughly doubled in size, which it did, which is really great. So that's what I was hoping to see happen. if your starter's not quite doubling, if it's say 50% larger, it may still be active enough to make your bread. But if it's only like 20% larger or 15% larger, it's probably not ripe enough. It's not mature enough to make the bread. So you really want to, we're doing this to prepare ourselves for the next step, but it also acts as something of a test as to how alive the starter is. If it's not going as fast as you would like, if you only had like 15% height here, don't worry about it. Just mix it back with the rest of that starter, let it go another day or two, and then try again, and it might work out at that point. So it's pretty flexible in terms of that. Don't give up on it. Don't throw anything away. So that's the refresh. We did that last night. So this was Monday's show. We checked in on this Tuesday. This is Thursday's show. And then here we are on Friday, and we're going to make dough. And we're going to make pizza, and we're going to make bread out of that dough. This process of making dough will probably take you 6 hours. So it's good to do while we're in self-isolation at home. It's not 6 hours of active time, but you need to be around for about 6 hours. And obviously, nobody's going to want to sit there and watch this show for 6 hours, so we are doing this a little less real time than we have in the past. I'm going to try and let you see some of the major elements of it so that you're armed with what you need to try and do this at home. But we fast forwarded a little bit, and then I already have some dough that I made earlier today, and we're going to use that to make bread and to make pizza. But I'm going to walk you through each step.
Is bread dough and pizza dough the same?
Yeah, pizza's just bread. I mean, sometimes you adjust the recipe a little. A lot of pizza doughs have a little bit of olive oil in them, but you can make bread dough and pizza.
With the quick thing we made the quick pizza dough the other week?
You can make it into bread.
You can make that into bread?
Mm-hmm. Actually, the quick pizza dough was very, very similar to the white loaf that we made on Tuesday. The recipe is almost exactly the same. We took the olive oil out of it, and we let it rise a little longer, but it was very similar. All the same proportions, basically, all the same ingredients. All right, keep the questions coming. We'll field them as they come in. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mix the dough. And what we're going to do for that dough is we're going to mix 500 grams of white flour, 500 grams of whole wheat flour, fresh ground whole wheat flour, 200 grams of a refreshed starter, so that's this from last night, 850 grams of water. But we're going to split this up. We're going to do 700 grams of water right now while we're mixing the dough, and we're going to add 150 grams of water after an hour. This is a method that Richard shared with me, and in his mind, this allows the gluten in the bread to develop a little bit better when it's a little bit drier. And by the time you add that water in, it feels like it has it's a more substantial dough. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add 15 grams of salt, but we're going to add that at the 1 hour mark. So we're not going to add that initially. The reason for that is it may inhibit a little bit of the chemistry that we want to have happen early on in the dough development. The other thing that is going to happen when we add the salt is the gluten network is going to contract a little bit, and we want to wait before we do that. So this is the ingredients for the dough. We're going to make it right now. We're going to mix the dough. We're going to let it sit for 30 minutes. Then we're going to knead the dough, and I'll talk a little more about that. Then we're going to shape the dough and proof it, and then we're going to bake it. Yeah.
2 questions that came up. So the first one was, let's say, remind me, did you cover the refresh or same as starter, or leave it open?
I left it open. I did not cover it, and I wouldn't recommend you cover it. So you can just leave it open.
Second question. Do you make pizza dough from fed, active starter, or discarded starter?
Well, that's a great question. The pizza dough, we want it pretty much to be like the bread dough. So we're going to use the refresh starter for this. We need that elasticity. We need all those same qualities that we want for the pizza. But there are a lot of fun things we can make with the starter, and we'll get into that later. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to measure out that 500 grams of fresh wheat. Now this is a lot of fresh wheat, and I'm not going to make you guys wait. I ground it right before the show, something I've been meaning to do for a little while, but I keep forgetting. But that came out of our grain grinder right here. I'm using this hard red winter wheat. This is from up in Gill, Massachusetts, but there's a lot of different sources of this kind of wheat. And I put it into the grinder here, and I let it make a loud noise for like 4 or 5 minutes. And here we go, 500 grams of fresh wheat flour. And now I'm going to add to that 500 grams of this white flour. And this is a bread flour, it's an organic bread flour. I'm using the organic bread flour we use at Clover, which is from a producer called La Milanese. It's a Canadian organic flour producer that we like a lot. They've been doing it for a really long time. They're very good at what they do. They have a website, and you can order flour from them. There are other sources for organic bread flour. King Arthur is a source. You can often pick up flour at your grocery store. Sometimes you can even pick up organic flour, sometimes not organic. I would go for organic over bread flour, so if you can't find any organic bread flour, but you can find organic all-purpose, I would do that. I think there's a lot of nasty stuff in the non-organic flour, and I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but it's my strong point of view on that. So at Clover, all the flour we use is organic, and I think a lot of the gluten sensitivities that people have may come from the heavy loads of chemicals that are on a lot of our conventional flour. So I've got both of these here, and I am mixing this now with my fingers, just gently. And what I'm doing is I'm combining those flours a little bit. I don't need to go crazy here. I'm just doing that so when I mix the water, I don't have clumps of white and clumps of whole wheat. So that's a pretty simple thing. Those are the dry ingredients we're going to use. Here I've got a jar, and I'm going to use this to measure my water. And I want 700 grams of water to start with. So let's get this up to 700 grams. Now I've done this a few times, and I know that when I add that water up to 700 grams, and then I add my starter, it gets almost over full. Violet, could you grab me a spoon, sweetie? So this is 700 grams of water. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to dump a little bit of that off, just so I have some more room in here, and then I'm going to tear it out. So that was 700 grams of water. Some of it's already been added. Now here's the refresh starter, and I'm going ahead and adding 200 grams of this refresh starter in here. Yep, question, hold on just a second, kiddos. Alright, and so I'm going to go ahead and shake this up in here. So this is what we're inoculating the bread with. And some of that starter was floating, some of it was like sinking a little bit. The more that it's floating, the better. I did a loaf with this morning, so I know that it's going to work for us. The other starter, the 5-day-old starter I had, so one I started last Saturday, was much more floaty. And why don't I just show you guys what that looks like. So I'm just going to fill this up so I've got something to demonstrate with. And we get, so this starter is made with one I started on Saturday, so it's just a little bit older. The other ones we started Monday. But I can show you, this is a little more desirable, and what it means is that it's going to make a little more active bread. So you see that starter's floating, the other one sank a little bit. This one's probably in a little bit better shape. So that one's 5 days old, or a little bit more, and the other that one's 6 days old now, and the other one is since Monday, so it's 4 days old. So I think that one's in a little bit better shape. So you may find at home that your starter's not quite ready. It might be, it might not be. Like I said, it depends a little bit on temperature and some other things. Our house is not that hot right now, so it's been in the like 68 degrees, and maybe a little cooler at night, and so that might affect how fast it's developing. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So, what kind of flavor differences do you get from freshly ground flour?
So fresh ground flour, I think first and foremost, it's going to be very, very nutritious. But it also does change the flavor a lot. It tastes really, really yummy. There's a lot more depth of flavor. There's a lot more like interesting notes. And so if you want to start out with fresh flour, I would send you back to our brownie episode where we used fresh wheat to make brownies. And compare those brownies to brownies made with white flour, and they're like night and day. And we have a recipe where we made chocolate chip cookies with fresh wheat. And also, I think you'll notice the same thing, that they're just really flavorful and really delicious. The bread, you're going to know the same kind of thing. The white bread's really easy to eat, but it doesn't have a lot of flavor. The whole wheat bread It's going to have a lot more flavor. So I'm going ahead to mix this now. So this is the water, 700 grams of the water, and it's 1,000 grams of flour. We're holding off on adding the last bit of water, so we're going to add a little more water to this later. And we're also holding off on adding the salt. We're going to add the salt later. All right, and so what we're doing right now is we're just trying to get these guys all mixed. And so this is we're not trying to knead it at this point. We're just trying to get it thoroughly mixed. What's going to happen here is the dough, the flour is going to get better hydrated before we start acting upon it. But there's also going to be some chemistry going on in here too. There's going to be some enzymes that are working, and they're going to work on that flour a little bit. The gluten structure is going to change in there as well, and that's all going to happen without any active effort. So we're just going to sit and wait for a half hour and let this just rest. All right, so I just want to make sure there's no dry flour. I want to make sure all that's mixed. And take a peek at what this looks like. See, it's sort of a hairy beast. And we're just going to let that sit now for a half hour before we do anything else with that dough. Now, because I know you all don't want to listen to me talk about things for a half hour, I went ahead and I set one of these up a half hour ago. So we can grab that right now and take a look. And we can look at these side by side, which is pretty nice. So this looked exactly like that a half hour ago. The only difference here is I made this one a half hour ago and I just made this one. But you can see what this looks like, and you can see what this looks like, and already this dough is quite a bit different. Do you see the smoothness in that dough and the elasticity that's starting to develop? And that's not by working with it, that's just by letting it sit. This one here, which looks very different, it will look like that in a half hour. And it probably feels a little hard to believe that, but that's what's going to happen. So we're just going to let that guy sit for a little bit. All right, so just to review where we are, let's come back to the blackboard here. So we did the mixing. That's done. We mixed the dough. Now we're moving on to the kneading stage. And this kneading stage, I've been trying to work on whether there's a easier way to do this. I don't know a better way to say that, but something that involves less time. But I haven't yet beat this method, and this is the method that Richard showed me. The benefit is you can get this lofty whole wheat loaf that I've never seen or created otherwise. I think most people assume as you get whole wheat into the dough that it's like a brick, and it is really, really hard to make a whole wheat loaf like rise up and feel fluffy. And this method will get you a whole wheat dough that rises up and feels fluffy. It's amazing, but it is a little bit intensive. So I'm just going to go through what it is. And if I come up with a faster way to do it, I'll share it with y'all, but this is what I know right now. First of all, we're going to knead it every 5 minutes for an hour. So that's 12 times. 12 more than I have fingers. We're going to knead it, wait 5 minutes, 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 knead it, wait 5 minutes. I did this morning with the other doughs while I was cleaning the kitchen. So I came down this morning, I made it, I was cleaning the kitchen, I'm making breakfast, kneading dough, making coffee, kneading dough, cleaning something up, kneading dough. And that's how I fit it into my day. You're going to then add the salt and water, and then you're going to knead it every 30 minutes for an hour. So you're going to knead it, knead it, knead it, and it's a different kind of knead. So I'll show you that's more like a fold. And then you're going to fold it again every 60 minutes for 2 hours, and I'll show you how that works. The fold's the same thing, you're just doing it a little more and then a little less frequently. After that, you're going to shape it, and you're going to proof it. And if you watched the previous bread episode, then that should be a little bit familiar to you. And then we're going to bake it. So that's what we've got ahead. This dough right here is finished the mixing stage. So we just did the mixing, we're done with that. So now we're into the kneading stage, so I'm going to knead it. So I'm going to do the first of the every 5 minutes. Now, before I do that, just to remind us all visually and to make sure I don't forget what I'm supposed to be doing here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 150 grams of water here. So you remember we only put in 700 of the 850, and the other waters can be added later. I don't need to add it yet, but as we get going later on, I will add that. I'm just doing that so I don't forget it. And then I also need 15 grams of salt. So I'm going to set that aside here as well. There we go. So that's all ready to go as well. So I've got my salt and my water. These will be added to this a little bit later. I think it's just good for us to remember that they're there. Now, I do need wet hands to handle this, so I'm just going to use that water for those wet hands because it's going to be added to this dough. Now what I'm going to do at this stage, so this is the early kneading. You want to try this?
Yes.
Get your hands washed and soaked and you can try some of these kneading. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to grab this and turn it with my hand, and then I'm rotating the bowl slightly. So I'll slow down and do that again. So I'm grabbing this and turning it, and I'm rotating the bowl slightly. I'm sorry, I say grab it, but it's really more of a touch. You don't really want to tear at the dough. So I'm using my knuckles. My hands are pretty big, so if I had a bigger dough, I might be able to do it with an open hand. In this case, my hands are pretty big, so I'm making a little fist to come up and around with my fist, and I'll turn it a little bit, turn it around, turn it a little bit, turn it around. You can see how that's working. Now, if you're just going to have to find out how to recreate this method with your own anatomy. You know, each of us is like going to be have a little different size hands and a little different action. But the idea is I'm working it into the bowl. I'm actually like pushing it pretty hard there, and I'm trying to develop some tension in the dough. That tension is going to make this gluten network. So you want to go ahead and try that, Blue? All right. Awesome. Really good job, Blue. So we can stop right there. And then what I would do is I've been using my watch as a timer, but at this point I would just set the timer for 5 minutes. And that would be I would just set that for 5 minutes. I might as well go ahead and just do that so we can sort of do this live. So I'm gonna do a little 5-minute timer. It'll buzz me in 5 minutes, and I'll come back and do that again. This can just sit without a towel on it or anything. It can just sit out. It's fine. It doesn't need anything more than that. So that's all set right here. We're going to continue doing that, like I said, every 5 minutes for an hour. And then we're going to get to a place where the dough starts to look a little different. So this dough is a little later along in the process, but I'm going to use this as an example. And this is more what it's going to look like at this point. So what you'll do here is this one's like toward the very end, so it might not be quite this pillowy, but you're going to bring it in and you're going to let it stretch out a little bit and fold it over. So can you see this? So I'm like imagining its feet are facing away from me, and I'm sort of sitting it down toward me. Does that make sense? And we'll do it again. I'm like sitting it away from me. Now, right now, you can see it's starting to tear a little bit. That's telling me, stop, don't touch me anymore. So you don't do this too many times. I even went a little bit far. It'll be okay, but you can see the tears developing. So at this stage, it may have only wanted 2 folds. Earlier on, it's definitely going to want like 3, 4, 5 folds. And you're just going to get a sense of it. You want to stop, though, before you get too much of that tearing. Over time, it's going to get pillowy like this. See how this is marshmallow-y versus this dough we just made, which is more like hard. See that? It's sort of different. See how this one's like more pillowy. So that's you guys did a little something here. Let me help you out. Here you go. There you go. Okay. All right. Now, if there are other questions, you guys can ask them. Blue and Violet are interested in answering for you. Sorry, didn't mean to bump you, babe. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this kneading action, boom, 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 every 5 minutes for an hour. Then we're going to do this folding action, half hour, half hour, half hour, half hour, and then 1 hour. And then we're going to get to a place where we're ready to shape. And the shaping is going to happen like this. So let's go ahead and do that next. So the way we're going to shape the dough. So Blue, you want to head over to there and hit a check mark on the kneading stage, because we're just keeping people following where we are. Let's put a nice big check mark on that. Awesome. And then put a little check mark on that, and then put a little star on the next one, which is the shaping. Ugh. Good job, bud. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna flop this out of its bowl. Okay, this beautiful pillowy loaf. Now, when we're making these loaves, we're making them at 1 kilogram. And so that is the right amount to make two loaves. So 500 kilo loaves. And the loaves that I'm going to make right now, these are going to be, so I'm going to just get this little guy into a happy little ball. And I'm going to just tucking it under there a little bit. Try and do the same thing with this one. I'm just tucking it under. Now, the dough isn't very sticky, but it's a little bit sticky. And I'm using that stickiness to help create a little tension in it and to sort of get it to stick a little bit on purpose, a little bit to the table surface underneath. And then we would let these sit for a few minutes, like 5-10 minutes, just to rest a little bit. Basically, I would think at this stage, this guy's like a little bit delicate, and we just shocked its system a little by dumping it out of that bowl and cutting it up into these two shapes. So we're gonna let it relax a little bit. We don't want it feeling too tense and too scared. We're just gonna let it relax for a second. And then what we're going to do is we're gonna take it again, and we're gonna shape it, and we're gonna put it into a loaf pan like this. And then we're going to set that aside to proof. And I'm going to do that in a minute. Once it proofs, it's going to look like this. And you can see this one, we're having the same problem we had on the show the other day, where it's like almost a little overproofed. You can see it's like it's getting a little bit far along. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in the oven now. And this is the same method we used with the white loaf when we put it in the oven. I'm going to score this with my blade. And you can see that skin was getting a little bit tough on the top. All right, there we go. I hacked it up a little bit, but I think it'll work out pretty nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven right here, and I'm going to take boiling water. I'm going to pour that in cast iron pans I have. I'm going to shut that quickly to try to capture that steam in there. So this is a hot oven, 500 degrees. And I poured that boiling water in to those cast iron pans to capture that steam in there. That steam is going to let the crust stay supple during its initial stage. And what we're doing is we put it in high heat, trying to keep it steamy, and that's going to let it lift itself up. And then we're going to turn the temperature down, not worry about the steam in a few minutes, and that's going to let it continue on. So I'm going to go take a peek at it. When you're doing this at home, be careful in this stage because you're dealing with a lot of heat and steam. Just add a little bit more. There you go. And we shut it. Keep that steam in there. All right. And hopefully that's going to develop really nicely in there. Like I said, it was a little overproofed. Some of these were just really rocking. Like these doughs were just going a little faster than I was expecting. I was trying to time them for the show perfectly. That one would have liked to have gone into the oven about 45 minutes ago. And I even retarded it for a little bit in the refrigerator, and I still couldn't slow it down. It was just having a lot of fun and ready to go. Yeah, you want to do that? So wash your hands really well first. So over here, wash your hands with soap. So that's a little bit of a hassle. As you're doing this, you want to keep your hands super clean. So every time you're going between, you're going to wash your hands. And when I was doing it this morning, I just kept these loaves over here by the sink because I would wash my hands, turn the loaf, wash my hands, turn the loaf. You got it, bud?
Yeah.
All right, go for it now. So the way I do it on my watch is it has this cool little thing where you can just hit repeat. So every time it went off on me, I just let it repeat. Nice job, Blue.
Are you some water?
We're gonna wait until later for the water. So we're gonna wait until an hour before we do the water. All right, that's good, Blue. So you don't need to do this for too long. And that stickiness, we shouldn't be bothered by that. That's going to go away. It's just, that's part of what this process is about, is developing that gluten network, and that will all go away. really nicely. So I'm just going to clean up this little scoring knife, which I'm always nervous with anybody cutting themselves. This thing's so sharp. It's just a simple little dough razor, but
Where'd you get it?
I can't even remember. I've had it for a while, but I keep it really dry and clean, and it stays very, very, very sharp. I'm always a little bit afraid people are going to cut themselves on it. Alex has a really fancy one. My brother-in-law's got this like really beautiful one. That one's just a little plastic one. Okay, so we're gonna come back to these guys. So we just took a little interlude there, so hopefully doesn't feel confusing. So we're gonna come back to these guys, and these are the ones that we want to shape into loaves that we're gonna cook. And so what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna take,
There's a question.
Okay.
Okay, someone said, how do you get the differences between a soft sandwich loaf and a crusty loaf like this one?
This will be, it'll be softer, I think, than people are expecting, but it's not going to be like super, super soft like a sunbeam or something. There are a lot of different things people use to keep those loaves the way they are. A lot of those commercial loaves are actually extruded. They aren't a yeasted process at all. Say nothing about naturally fermented. And a lot of those have different additives in them. Sometimes they use powdered, like dried milk powder. They use other kinds of elasticizers and other kinds of preservatives. You only have to declare the ingredients if you're above a certain percentage by the FDA. So there are a lot of ingredients in commercial products that aren't even declared on the label, but the ones that are above the threshold, you can see them on the label. A lot of those breads that are super soft have lots and lots of stuff in them to make them that way. But this one's going to be like a little bit on the soft side. It's not going to be like a real hard, crusty bread. It's going to be a really nice sandwich bread. So I just put a little bit of flour on the top of this loaf, and now I'm going to turn it over on its back. So it's lying down now. And this is where I sort of brought it around. It's opposite of that one now. And what I'm going to do at this moment is get a little bit of water on my fingers. I'm going to grab it on the sides, and I'm going to bring it in like that. And I'm going to do this like a little bit quickly because I don't want it sticking to my hands too much. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to pull it toward me, and I'm going to fold it. And then I'm going to wrap it up as well as I can into a little package. I'm going to take this little package, and I'm going to tuck it into my loaf pan. And it's sticking me a little bit. Oh no, I think we're going to make it though. All right, I'm going to just tuck it in a little bit on the edges. What I'm hoping happened here is I'm hoping that I have a sheath of gluten on the top that's going to capture those air bubbles as they start to form. And this looks pretty nice to me. It's a nice place to start. I think this dough is so active, it's probably going to be ready to bake in about an hour. Yours might take 3 hours, so it really will depend, but this dough is ripping right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the proofer, and you don't need to have a proofer at home. The reason I'm putting in the proofer is it will speed it up a little bit. That way, before the show's over, we might be able to take a peek at it and see how it's developing. So I'm just going to clean that dough off my hands now. And now we have another one there, and yep, it's saying go for it. Yep.
Oh yeah, it's
Perfect.
time.
And I'm going to take a peek in here because I might need to add a little bit more water. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
We're way overproofed. That's okay though.
wait, what?
It was way overproofed. I was a little bit afraid of this. It looked like it was ready to go 45 minutes ago. And
Oh my
sure
God.
enough, it's a monster. But it'll be a beautiful, delicious monster. You want to see the picture? You want to see it? Get on. So this just has everything to do with it being overproofed. If I'd gotten it in there earlier, it would be like a picture-perfect loaf. But I had this problem with the white bread last week too. It's hard to time it exactly to show. And what we did with the white loaf is we had one like that was overproofed. And then we followed up with another one that was just perfect, and you can see a picture of both of them. I'll do that probably here too, that one I just put into the proofer. We'll pull it and bake it at just the right moment. You'll be able to see what it should look like. Yeah,
Is that good?
it's great, so let it be. Awesome. Okay, so that's the shaping. Now this one, I only have 2 of those loaf pans, so I could do one of 2 things. I could just wait until that other one comes out of the oven, and then use that pan, which would be fine. This isn't going anywhere in that amount of time. The other thing I could do is I could shape this guy into a round, And maybe we'll just do that to show you guys how that works. So this case, we'll take a cloth because I don't want this to stick. And this is a little bit of rice flour. This is what we use when we make the pizzas. Put a little rice flour on there. And now, what we're going to do with this dough is something pretty similar to the last one. So I'm going to give it a little flipsy. And then, similar to the last one, I'm going to make a little envelope out of it. The difference here is it's just going to be a little bit more round in shape. So I'm going to take one side and bring it over. I'm going to take another side, and I'm going to bring that over. And I'm going to fold this piece up.
It's a burrito.
Yeah. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring the whole thing over like that and let it sit on its seam for a minute because I want that seam to sort of settle in. And I'll let it sit on that seam for a couple minutes. And then once I think that seam is sealed, then I'll go ahead and I'll move this into that basket. And that will become a round loaf. It also needs to proof just like the other one, so we'll let it proof in that basket. All right, awesome. Blue, I think my watch is buzzing at me again.
Okay.
So it's like over and over and over again. It's like for an hour. You gotta take care of it a lot, but it does reward you. Now, we've got pizza doughs we're gonna make, which is super fun. But I thought before we get going on the pizza doughs, actually, I'll just review this one more time. Hopefully it's clear for everybody. And then we'll come back and probably plop that guy into proof, and then move on to pizza doughs. So, all the way back, we started a starter. 3 or 5 days is what it needs. You don't do much. You set it up, and you touch it a little bit once a day. After your starter's ready, you refresh it. You do this as an overnight activity. And you mix up 20 grams of your starter with some new flour and water, and you let that sit overnight. This becomes the starting point for your dough. And then you make your dough. I did that this morning, and we also just demonstrated some. But you mix some flour with some refreshed starter and some water. And your water, most of it goes in initially, some of it goes in 1 hour, and your salt goes in at 1 hour in. And when I'm saying 1 hour, I mean 1 hour into making the dough. So we first mix the dough, then we let it sit for 30 minutes. There's a lot of benefits that come out of that. Then we kneaded the dough. We're doing that once every 5 minutes for an hour. And then we're adding the salt and water, and we're going to fold it, a more gentle kneading, every 30 minutes for an hour. And then we're going to fold it every 60 minutes for 2 hours, so it gets much more gentle. And then we're going to shape it. Once we've shaped it, we're going to proof it. I've written 3 hours here, but these doughs are going really, really fast. That one we just put in the oven, I thought that it would be about 3 hours, and I thought we'd want to put it in the oven on the show at 4:30. So I got it all ready to go at 1:30, but it was ready to put in the oven by 2. So it was your double time. I think we're probably going to see this one we just put in the proofer going very quickly too. So you need to adjust yourself a little bit. If you're a professional and you're baking every day, you know exactly how long your stuff takes. But otherwise, if you're doing this at home, you just need to pay a little bit of attention. And that poor guy was ready to go in earlier, and it didn't. We didn't put it in now, and we can take a peek at it, and you can see it's going to be really delicious, but it is funky looking. And I am going to put a little bit more steam in there, and that I've turned down the temperature now to 400 degrees for that. All right. Then, so we shaped it, proofed it, and then we bake it. 500 degrees for about 15 minutes, and then 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. And at the end of that, we're going to have a loaf of bread. So that's the process. Now, this is the one that was sitting for a half hour. It's not quite a half hour yet, but it's already starting to change. We can see it's becoming smoother. So that's that half hour stage. Now, pretty soon, Blue's going to have to start kneading that one with the other one. So I'll just put it over here for him. When he does his little kneading process, he can knead both of them. All right. Hey, Blue, you good with that? I think they had a little something going on. Violet just whispered in Blue's ear, and then off they went. I'm sure you'll be back. All right, so I'm just going to show you guys a couple things before we do the pizza. So I have a few breads here, and what I'd like is, my big message is the same as what Richard said the other day. Like, have fun with this. You're going to make bread. You're going to be able to eat it. You're not going to throw stuff away, right?
Whoa, that's a lot of loaves.
Yeah, this is a lot of loaves. I saved, over the last few days, I saved our mistakes. And I wanted just to show you guys what some of these look like. So this one is a dough where it overproofed by a lot. So this process we're doing, that one was overproofed. This was way more overproofed. What happened is Wednesday we set up dough, and I thought it was cold enough in the house it would take all day. By the time we got back at night, because we went and we had a lot of fun in the woods and stuff. By the time we got back at night, that dough had just totally overproofed, fallen down. I tried to recover it a little bit and make some bread, but this is what came out of it. So you see, it's really flat. This is a different one. I put this one in the oven without that steam, and you can see what happened to it. It wanted to grow and become like fluffy, but it didn't have the steam in the oven. So you can see it's blowing its seam right there. It's coming out funny right here. So both of these are misshapen, mistaken breads. But I'm going to cut them open and show you. They're really delicious. They make great toast. They're not like your bread. You're not going to open a bakery with these, but they're still totally delicious. And I'm expecting you guys are going to have a lot of different things that happen at home too as you're doing the bread. This one here. So this is another example of a failure. This one is from the starter being a little bit too young, so it wasn't quite ready. And you saw we were looking at our starter from Monday. It was just, after we refreshed it this morning, it was just borderline. This was from that same starter, but I tried to do it on Wednesday morning. So that starter was only 2 days old at that point. I've tried to refresh it Tuesday night, so it was only 24 hours, and then tried to do it the next day. I didn't think it would work, but I was curious what it would come out like. And so that's this loaf. And so this is one where the starter is not active enough. And there's not, again, we're going to be able to eat it. It's totally edible, but it's not going to be lofty. Now this one I did actually just before the show. This is you see with this last one, we made a round, and then we also have one in the proof box. Well, I did that, the one that's misshapen in there, this one was done at the same time, but I didn't wait. I actually baked this when it was ready to bake. And you can see this and this are the same flour, same everything, except that this guy has some loft to it. And I'll cut into these and you can see what they look like on the inside. Yeah, Blue?
Yeah, we have a question. Okay. How do you
You
know
can hear it's got nice crunchiness.
that it's done two things, if not by the amount of time?
Oh, by how much it grows. You want it to get like pillowy, and you want it to grow almost double in size.
That looks good.
So take a peek. This is really beautiful. We can smell it. It smells like honey. We're so lucky. I think our starters keep smelling like honey. I love it. It's awesome. It's just warm still, but I'm going to, because I brought it out of the oven about 45 minutes ago, so I don't want to destroy it. But you can see the sponginess to it. I mean, this is a whole wheat bread, so it's not that tough cake that you might expect. I mean, this is really beautiful. It's like flexible. It's got a little crunchiness to it, but it's not a overly hard crust. This is a really nice bread. It's going to be really fun and delicious. This one. Oh yeah, go for it, Blue. Thank you. Thanks for remembering, buddy. All right. So you can compare these. See that? This is the one where the starter wasn't ready. I didn't do anything else differently. I kneaded it the same way. The difference here is the starter wasn't ready. It's the same ratios and everything, and it just was too early. The starter was a little bit too young. So just thought that was nice to be able to see that. Let's take a peek at these guys too. You wanted something? All right. Okay, so we're gonna cut this open, and this one's a little more dense than I would like. I'd like a little different crumb, and so hopefully the one we're making right now is a little bit different looking than this. I'm gonna go ahead and cut into the penthouse side of this thing. And you can see it was trying to come up. It's also a little bit undercooked. See the gumminess in there? That means I didn't quite cook it long enough. But again, this is going to make really, really delicious toast, and we're going to totally enjoy this in the morning. It's going to be really yummy. This one's going to be delicious as well. So all of these will be tasty things. None of these will get thrown out. I'm going to cut into this one too. And remember, this is the one that overproofed because we went on our way on Wednesday and we didn't come back until it had overproofed. So again, you can see, now this is actually what I'm more used to as a whole wheat bread. This is more what I would expect, but you can see it's like totally different than this experience over here, right? This is really hard to achieve. That's why we're doing all this work. This is not hard to achieve if you go all white. It's not hard to achieve with 15% whole wheat. It's not that hard with 20% whole wheat. But remember, this is 50% whole wheat, and not just that, this is fresh wheat, which is a little harder to work with than commercial whole wheat. But it's really rewarding. It's got a really wonderful smell. But this we can create. This is a totally achievable thing. But if we do a few things wrong, we might end up in this little hall of shame over here. So I thought it'd be fun if I shared a few of these examples, because I think when you're first starting to bake, one of the really hard things to figure out is, am I doing this right or wrong? What am I aiming for? What does success look like? I just want to give you guys a sense of some of the variables that can lead to some other results. But don't throw any of it away. You can eat all of this, so it's a fun time to experiment. And honestly, we have been eating bread like this, right, Violet, for like the last few weeks, because we've been going through lots of experiments, right?
Yeah.
And what are some yummy ways we've had it?
We've had it with honey and butter and cinnamon.
Cinnamon toast is a really good way to go on this. Super yummy. And you can make bread puddings, which are really fun too. We've definitely had a lot of toast. We've made grilled cheese a few times. We've made open-faced sandwiches with the bread. There's a lot of different things that we can use this bread for that are going to be so delicious, and we're going to be really thankful to have it. Fluffernutters, yeah, we took a few perfect pieces of bread to make some fluffernutters too, didn't we? Yeah. We had some really beautiful loaves and they went really quickly. All right. So, and I will say, of all these, this is probably the one everyone's going to want to eat first. So there's no question this is a little more delicious outcome. Let's move on to making, to put this little guy to bed, and then we can start making some pizza dough. So what I'm going to do now, I've let that rest, so I'm hoping that seam has come together nicely, and I'm just gently lifting it up, and it has. So that's the seam I created when I folded everything over. It's holding pretty well. You can see it's trying to relax a little bit out of the seam, but it's not too bad. I'll put this in the proofing, the proofer, and it's going to roughly double in size, which will look sort of like that. And it'll look pillowy, and that'll be the point where we put it into bake. We're going to have this join its little friend in here. And the other one is coming, sorry, but I haven't been back here. This other one is coming along pretty nicely, so I think by the end of the show we can take a peek at it. It might even be ready to go in the oven. It's not too far off. All right, awesome. So if anybody has questions, be sure to ask them. Hey, Clem.
Okay.
Clem, do you want to try and knead that? Because I think I may have lost the loaf.
Eat what?
Knead this. So we're just kneading it every 5 minutes. I'll show you what the technique looks like. So you're just going to free it up a little if you need to, and then you're going to just turn it a little bit and then push it down. Turn the bowl and push it down. Turn the bowl and push it down. You're just going to keep doing that until it feels like it's getting a little stiff and resisting you, and then you're just going to stop at that point.
This one?
Yeah. Yours is going to go a lot less than mine because yours is a half hour further along than mine. This one just got started. And so that's starting to come apart a little bit. I'm going to stop right there. Nice job, Clemmy. And that's good. You can stop right there. So these little kneading things, they're not major kneading sessions. They're just little. Richard doesn't call this kneading. He calls this playing with the dough. At some point I had to say, Richard, you have to be more specific with me and like tell me what you mean when you say play with the dough. But and I'm sure my technique isn't quite as good as a professional baker, but it's this is basically what we're going to do. All right. Should we make some pizzas, guys? Yeah?
Yes.
Quickly.
Let's do it.
Is this the pizza dough right here?
Yes, that's going to be the pizza dough. Exactly.
Looks like there's
Um,
some cheese that's already grated here.
Yes, thank you. And there should be some tomato sauce in the fridge. I got some caramel olives, and I don't know. The other thing I was thinking might be fun if you guys wanted is like put some red onions on or something, or some capers.
Yeah.
What do you think? Does that sound
Yeah.
good, Glenn? All right. So I think at this point it may be better for you to film it from that side, just because it might be a little easier to see. What do you think? Does that work better?
Sure.
Okay, so we made pizza a few times. This isn't gonna be the first time, but this is the first time we've done it with like a totally naturally fermented dough. And these little doughs have been sitting there nicely, so maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. And they're like a little bit pillowy. So when I push them, it comes back, but not all the way. That's like a nice sign that it's ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and use the same technique we've used in past episodes when we made pizza dough, which is I'm using my fingers to push that dough away. And some people were asking about how much dough to make a pizza. It depends on the size pizza you want and how thick and doughy you want your pizza to be, which can be sort of a personal preference. If I stopped where I am right now, this would be a pizza that's a little more on the doughy side. We typically, you mean spin it? I'm not going to try that on my first one. We typically go for a pizza that's a little bit thinner crusted, but not super thin. And this is like, this size dough looks really good for that. Now, to give you a sense of the scale here, we had a kilo of dough. I split it into, this is a quarter of that, so this is 250 grams. So you can get 4 pizzas this size out of that dough. And I think I did just right. If I went much larger, we couldn't have fit it on a pan. So we got a little bit lucky there, huh? And then I'll do this first one, guys, and then one of you guys can do the next one. If that
It's
sounds
almost
like
a perfect circle.
Yeah, not bad, huh?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna take a little peek at our bread here, and that bread should be just about done right now. All right, and this poor bread looks so goofy, but it's an unfortunate little bread because it was ready to be a perfect little beauty queen 45 minutes ago, or an hour ago, and we just didn't get it in on time. That said, we're going to take this guy out of here, and it'll be really, really delicious bread. It's actually going to be beautiful inside. It's just, it just looks a little bit like a monster. That one that's proofing right now will come out beautiful. So I'm going to turn this oven up a little bit right now, and people have been asking me about pizza stones. I typically don't cook with a pizza stone, but you could if you wanted. I think most of the methods I'm showing you for pizza work really well without pizza stones because that's typically how I work. But if you try them with a pizza stone, you may just have to play around a little bit with the timing if you don't want them to be too crunchy and cracker-like.
Maybe a little big.
I made it a little bit big. I think you're right, but it's going to work. There we go. All right, and now we need some olive oil. That guy's looking.
Should I knead the dough there?
Yes, we need to knead the dough. Good job, Blue. Thank you for being on that. Okay. So Blue's kneading that dough. So I guess you could also do this during pizza night when everyone's working on the pizza. Somebody could be kneading the dough. That might be another time to fit it into your life. I can see why, if you're baking for yourself, for nutrition and taste and cost, you probably would want to break that baking into an activity that happens once or maybe at most twice a week, because I think that it's not very hard to make a bunch at once. I mean, double that size of the recipe, it's not a lot more work, or you can make it 4 times the size, really. And bread freezes very well. So you could always make a bunch of loaves and then freeze some of them if you have enough room. So I'm going to go ahead. This is a technique that we did previously when we made pizza. I'm just putting some olive oil on that dough. This is the 3rd time we've made pizza now. So if you want to go back and check out some of the earlier pizza episodes, those are some more accessible doughs that are a little less tricky than this dough. Might be good to get started First of all, with the super fast pizza dough, you can make it in like faster than you can get pizza delivery. And then the second dough we did was an overnight dough, which had more flavor and better texture, but took more planning. It wasn't a whole lot of more work, but it was a little more planning. Now this dough is a dough that takes a lot more planning, unless you're already making bread, because we have to have a starter, and then we have to refresh that starter and then work on it in the morning. Now, I'm gonna put some.
That's a lot of tomatoes.
Yeah, I know it is, huh?
When did we make that much?
When did we make this much? The other day. I was like, I decided to make a lot at one time. All right, and now
It's really good.
I'm just going to spread that tomato sauce around. And I don't want to drown the pizza with tomato sauce. I think sometimes when people have a pizza that's not crispy enough, it's not because of lack of a pizza stone or something. I think sometimes it's because they've gone ahead and just drowned it in tomato sauce, and you really don't want to put too much on. I like to brush the edges of the pizza with a little bit of that, just to keep them from burning in a hot oven. And then let's put some cheese on it. You wanted to do that, Violet? Get over here. You look ready to go on the pizza. Yeah, go ahead and sprinkle some of that on. Clem, I was thinking it'd be good to put red onions on the pizza. Do you like that, Nina?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to grab one downstairs? Do you know where it is?
Just do
It's
that.
in like a grocery bag near the freezer. Awesome. And I'm just going to break up some caramel olives on here.
This is gonna be really good.
Make sure we get the pizza, the cheese on the pizza all the way to the edges too.
So I'm doing.
You're doing a good job.
Somebody asked, is the pizza dough exactly the same as the bread?
Yeah, we didn't change anything on this. It's exactly the same as the bread. And Richard was sharing with me a technique that he does at his bakery. Is he bakes out blanks, pizza dough blanks. So he makes these pizza doughs like this, and he bakes them, but with nothing on them. And then he freezes them. And then when he wants to make pizza, he just grabs them out of the freezer and fills them with some toppings and throws them in the oven, which I think is a really fun idea. I need a little bit of salt, and that's because this tomato sauce here doesn't have any salt, because it's just crushed tomatoes, which is sort of my favorite way to do it. And then put a little bit of oregano on this guy. The cheese we're using here is a sharp cheddar cheese, which is one of my favorites, and it's friendly for people that are lactose intolerant, but you can use any cheese, obviously. So we're going to throw this in the oven. Yes?
Question. So someone said, I got interrupted and missed a few minutes. Was the pizza dough prepared the same way from the starter as
Exactly.
the bread is?
Yes.
Or is it not worked with the same?
It was exactly the same. No difference at all. Now, that clock is ticking, so I'm hoping YouTube doesn't kick us off, which has happened twice now, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully we're still here in a minute. If we're not, I will put the pictures of the final results a little bit later. And we're just cutting up an onion to put on the pizza. This is, I think we use onions almost every meal, right? I need another bag of onions, huh?
Where do you get them all?
Where do we get all the onions? Before we started self-isolating, I bought a lot of onions. That's why they've been living downstairs, because there's so many of them, we couldn't fit them in the kitchen. But I think even then we may run out of them. Do you want thin ones or thick ones, guys?
Very thin.
Thin?
Yes.
Alright, there we go. Okay, now who wants to make the next pizza? Alright, well, let's see. Violet, why don't you do it? Blue, you've been having the fun of kneading everything. And you might need to knead it again. You want to do it? You want to knead it, Blue?
Sure.
Alright.
Make this.
Got it? Good job, Bugger. So do you remember how to do this on a little hand? Oh,
Sure.
It does need kneading again, Blue. So you want to do a little bit smaller one, maybe? Let's try that. Okay, so I'm going to just pop it over here, and then we're gonna take a little bit of flour, just so your fingers won't stick, and just tick, 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 tick. Remember how to do that? Yeah, just boom, 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 boom. This allows the dough to spread out without making it too tough. And it's a lot better than rolling action. You got it. Nice job. You just just touch it like that with your fingertips, and it keeps spreading out. And now we'll, at this point, like to flip it. Hold on just a second. It's sticking a little bit below. Yeah, that's probably just I didn't put quite enough flour down. So, yeah, let me just get a little more flour on it. There we go. We don't need this guy sticking at all. So, there we go. All right, you want to work on it a little bit more now? Just make that crust. Got it. And you can eat the other one now too, Blue. You got two.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yes. Wash my hands.
And you can come take a peek at this pizza. So it's coming along really, really nicely. We're gonna let that keep going. It's just gotten started, but it's looking beautiful. And I'm gonna try and take this guy out of the loaf. And now, one fun thing is when you cook one of these breads perfectly, it comes out of the pan without any effort, which is really amazing and fun and true. You just turn the pan over and bloop, the breadstick pops out. But when you don't do them right, they punish you a little bit. Here, you want a little hand, sweetie? Hold on a second. Just a second. Let's get it on. Let's get it on this before we get toppings going. Okay. That way, it gets. I used to do it the other way, and it doesn't work very well because when you try to move it, all the toppings go everywhere. So this is a good way to do it. You got it? All right. We'll go back to this loaf. See if I can get this guy out of here. And it may need
It looks like a marshmallow when you put like the top in the fire and it blows up.
I feel bad about this little loaf because it's all my fault. I knew when it needed to go in the oven. It was telling me, and I just didn't listen to it. And then, okay, so we almost have this guy out.
Add a little salt.
It's not too far off. I'm just trying to coax it out. So you see, when you're removing the loaf from the pan, this is a particularly difficult loaf to remove for obvious reasons, but you want to go around with the knife just to clear the side. And Richard told me that if you use a metal pan, they come out a lot more easily. I don't have the metal pans. I'd like to get some, I think. All right, so there's our misshapen loaf. But I can feel it's pillowy. It's going to be really delicious, just as it looks.
Somebody asked what temperature we're cooking it at.
We'll add it to our pile of bread over here. What's that?
What?
Oh,
Temperature?
500 degrees, the hottest my oven goes. Yep.
How long are you cooking for?
Now, this loaf, I'll show this one to you guys. This guy's almost ready. I would give that loaf maybe another 15 minutes or so, and it's gonna cook up really beautifully. It's not quite ready, but it's getting very close. How's it going there, Vi?
Good.
Yeah? All right. Put a little bit of salt in there. I almost grabbed the bread salt. We don't need to do that though. Here. There we go. All right. Now want to put some cheese on?
Yeah.
Let's do it. You want to put onions on this one?
Sure.
Do you have anything in the freezer that might be gummy on there? We have bananas. That would be a bad idea. Blueberries? I'm not sure any of those will work.
Why?
Yeah. I'm not sure about that. There. That would be fun. What about a little bit of corn? Yeah. A little bit of corn.
We could also
Corn and onions?
Do we
Corn
have
and onions,
ingredients? Last time we made that lemon,
You liked that one?
that lemon olive one.
Oh,
was
yes.
Really good.
That was really good. I don't have any more of that. We're gonna make pesto next week, and
We do
once
have
we
olives.
teach people how to make pesto, that could be really fun for people to make.
We do have
too.
olives.
Pesto
We
pizza.
could just make some more of that
The
sauce.
tapenade, you loved it so much. You love that tapenade. I'm loving that you love that. We're gonna put this guy in the oven.
Papa, can I shape the pizza?
What's that?
Can I shape the pizza?
Can you what?
Shape the pizza?
Of course. All right. That's looking very nice. And
This is a little eyes.
yeah, this pizza's almost ready. It's not quite there, but it's getting very close. So you see that? It's cooking up really well. I'm gonna give it about 2 more minutes in there, then we're gonna pull it out. Blue,
Yes.
time to knead the dough.
Okay.
We're getting a real life exposure to what it's like to take care of this dough for its first hour. It's a needy little thing. Do you get that? Needy? I made it like that. I thought you'd like that kind.
It's funny.
How you doing? You need a hand or you got it?
I got it.
Okay. Nice job. I think we'll probably have a little salad tonight. I think we still have some of those soda syrups from a couple weeks ago. So we might make ourselves some soda and sit down and watch a nice movie. Next week, we're going to do some really fun things. We're going to do fluff on Monday. So Clementine invented the most delicious fluff. I've always liked fluff. I haven't had fluff I don't like, but the fluff that Clementine made is just heavenly. And she had this recipe for fluff, and it asked for corn syrup, and we didn't have any in our house. And she was just doing it on her own without me, and she used honey instead. And it's incredible. So I was thinking maybe we'd share that with everybody on Monday. And if you have had a chance to bake over the weekend, you may have your own little bread garden. And so maybe some fluff or nutter sandwiches would be a fun way to use some of that freshly ground local wheat. And then we're also going to do next week, just to give you guys a preview, a lot of people have been asking about about cheesy grits. So we're going to do another breakfast episode after our overnight oats and our popover episode. We're going to do cheesy grits. It'll be a lot of fun. We're going to use cornmeal from Plymouth Grist Mill, which we work with a lot of clover, and they do really beautiful things. I'll talk more about what they do. And then we're also going to do pasta next week. So we're going to show you how to make pasta at home. Something I wanted to know how to do for a long, long time, and I tried so many different recipes that did not work out. Finally got to a place where I have a technique which works pretty well, and what we're going to do is another little race like the pizza race. We're going to put some water on to boil our pasta, and we're going to see if we can make fresh pasta before that water boils. So that'll be a little race next week, and then we're going to make pesto. I'm expecting the garlic mustard comes up, which is a nasty invasive species, and every year Clover has a volunteer group go out to pick garlic mustard. We're not doing it this year, but I thought we could show you all on the show how to make pesto out of garlic mustard, and we'll make some really yummy pasta with that next week on Wednesday. And then Thursday we're going to do popcorn. Movies got me thinking about that, so I thought I would promote all the things we were going to do next week. We'll make popcorn, and that corn is going to come from Plymouth Grist Mill as well. They have some really awesome popcorn, which I'm excited to use. So those are some really fun things coming up next week. I'm trying to think a little further forward how to get us back to what I was originally trying to do for the show, which was set it up so people could actually follow along in real time at home. I think it might be too ambitious to try to do that with 5 different episodes a week, but what we might do is transition ourselves at some point to doing fewer episodes, but doing a really good job preparing everybody ahead of time, letting you know what you need to have on hand, getting all of that out, and then putting on the episodes so you can actually follow along at home, which is what I always wanted to have happen, but I don't think we've really done a good job supporting that. So I want to thank everybody to joining us this week on In Air's Kitchen. We'll be back on Monday at 4 o'clock. Thank you.